Hello, everybody. Welcome to OpenMicVO. My name's Graham Spicer, and I'm so glad that you're here with us tonight. We're going to be talking about coaching, training, anything to do with voiceover education, ongoing education after you've already gotten yourself established as a voice actor. These are the types of topics we're going to be talking about tonight. I want to start by saying that we're in the middle of a heck of a storm here in Toronto tonight. And my power has already flickered once or twice. So if I disappear, hang in for another 2 or 3 minutes, if I don't come back, then it's because my power is gone. So I'm just putting that out there in case I just abruptly disappear at some point tonight. So we're talking about training, coaching, and I'm excited about this because I think that it's one of the areas of voiceover that, I mean, it's talked about a lot, but it's often overlooked as well. And especially for people who are, established voice actors. You've been at this a while and you haven't taken any coaching in a while. Let's talk about why ongoing coaching could be beneficial to you. Just quickly going over the house rules. Number one, first, please keep yourself muted at your end if you're not actively participating in the conversation. I do want you to actively participate. This only works. This little event only works if everybody contributes. It's not just about me yapping on. So I definitely want you to open your mic up and contribute. But if you're not actively speaking, please mute yourself. Otherwise, we get problems with echo and background noise and feedback, and it makes it difficult for us to carry on the conversation. Second rule is to please be nice. We're all professionals here. Some of us may be more established professionals than others, but if you are serious enough to be taking your voiceover career to the point where you're attending things like this event tonight, then you're a professional, and we fully intend to treat you as the professional that you are. If you are new to the business, remember that we were all new to the business once. Don't be intimidated, and there's no such thing as a silly question. The third point I want to raise is that I record OpenMicVO, and it gets posted to YouTube in the next couple of days. So if you do share something with us tonight, and we're talking about coaches. So maybe, you've got a comment about a coach that is less than nice. Just keep that in mind, because once this recording gets posted to YouTube, there's not much I can do about where it goes and who gets a chance to see and listen to it. So tonight, again, the topic is coaching and training. Whether you are new to the voiceover business or have been in it for a while, what type of coaching is most appropriate for you at the particular career stage that you're at? Those are the questions that we're entertaining tonight. In just 1 second or two, I'm going to start unmuting you. And once you see that you're unmuted, if you'd like to get us started with the first question or the first comment, that would be awesome. Let's start to unmute people here. I noticed that one of my favorite coaches is actually on the line with us tonight, Joe Lesh. Joe, how are you tonight?
Good, Graham. How are you?
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
I'm glad to be here. It's always good to see you.
Yeah, well, it's great that you're here, especially on a night where we're talking about coaching and training, which are obviously topics that you are expert in. So looking forward to hearing your contributions tonight.
I didn't shave today, so do I look okay on the phone?
You look perfect on the phone.
All right, great.
Still unmuting some people here.
So, Graham, it's Linda Broom. You did unmute me, so if you don't mind, I would love to ask a question. That's kind of got me perplexed a little bit, if that's okay.
Please.
I'm hearing a lot about predatory, and I'm putting quotes around that, coaches, and be wary of predatory coaches. And my question maybe is a little bit twofold. One is, how do I identify a predatory coach? And maybe what the definition of that is, or that might be the same question, is what does that look like, and how do we know one from a good coach? Because there are so many coaches out there that I might be interested in working with, but I'm so scared now because it's like I don't want to be taken advantage of. So I don't know if that's a very good topic to start with, but it's the one that's on my mind right now.
No, well, I'm pleased that you brought it up because it's a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And it's funny, in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be off to London, England, where I'm speaking at a voiceover conference called One Voice. And I am actually chairing a panel on voiceover ethics. And this is exactly the kind of topics that we're going to be talking about. And I think that there are some coaches out there that are clearly out just to take your money. And I think that those ones are perhaps relatively easy to pick out of the crowd. Those are the ones that say, show up to my weekend workshop on a Saturday morning and you'll leave on Sunday afternoon with a finished demo and you'll be booking voiceover work the next week. Those coaches are not in it for your long-term career viability. There are some coaches out there, though, that what one person may consider predatory, another one thinks is, hey, this person was just perfect for me to get started with my voiceover career. And those are the ones that are a little harder to, place into one bucket or another. I'm not sure that predatory coaches or good coaches versus bad coaches is black or white. I think that there's some gray in the middle as well. So I would like to throw it out to, there's quite a few of us on the line already. I'd like to throw it out to the crowd to ask your opinions on what does a predatory coach look like? What are the warning signs that someone should be looking for in order to avoid a particular coach? How do we identify them?
That's difficult, Graham, because they don't all look the same.
That's what I was saying, Joe, is that what one person may identify as predatory, maybe another person would not. So,
and some of them don't bother to shave before they come online.
I can think of lots of words to describe Joe Lesh, but predatory is certainly not one of them.
Bless you, Graham.
How would you define a predatory coach? Like, what do you think are some of the signs that someone should be looking for that would make someone question whether a coach is reputable or not?
You hit on one thing, and that was anyone who promises a demo in a short amount of time, because it takes time to build those skills and develop your skills where you're ready to do a demo. So I think anytime you hear that they promise you a demo after a certain amount of time, they don't know how long it's going to take. I mean, if I'm working with somebody, it might be a couple of coaching sessions. It might be 4. It might be 6. They might not have any business in show business. And I wouldn't hesitate to tell them in a minute that you're wasting your money, because I would much rather just be honest with somebody than have them throw their money away. Now, they could join some organization like WOVO, World Voices Organization. They've got some great references. If you're looking for references, you could get some references from people that belong to WOVO, preferably like Dave Cavassier or Dan Leonard. They could recommend people for you. I always think that recommendations are a strong suit for anyone.
Yeah, I certainly agree with you that word of mouth goes a long ways when it comes to being able to separate a predatory coach from an honest and ethical one. And, you know, to people who are checking into coaches, one of the first places I would go would be to the voiceover faceover groups like VO Pros is the one that kind of immediately pops into mind. And just post there, hey, I'm thinking about working with, you know, Bobby Smith. You know, he comes to me recommended by a friend. Does anyone have any experience working with Bobby, and what kind of coach is he? And I think that you'll pretty quickly get a sense from, like, the VO Pros has got hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of members now on that Facebook group. So I'm quite confident that if a coach has any sort of reputation whatsoever, that someone on VoiceOver Pros is going to be able to give you some thoughts.
I have a question. Am I not?
Please.
Well, I'm not showing up on, there I am. I'm showing up on the screen now. I want to ask a question, especially, I guess, from Joe from the other end. When did you feel comfortable enough to hang out your shingle? I mean, a lot of people are good teachers and a lot of people aren't good teachers, but when did you feel comfortable enough that you could hang out a shingle and call yourself a coach?
Good question.
Yeah, that's a good question, James. Thank you. You know, my first student was sent to me by a mutual manager that she and I had at the time. And my very first student was Reese Witherspoon. Reese was like 15 years old at the time.
The Reese Witherspoon?
Yeah, that's the one. So Reese was about 15 years old, and she was up for a Monday night movie of the week, and they wanted to hear if she could deliver her lines without a Southern accent. Even at 15, though, she was well on her way to achieving that, but she had a couple of issues with, like, right instead of right, just minor issues. But after I finished working with her, I thought, you know, I really enjoyed working with kids because, I mean, it's what she was at the time. And I got involved with that, and I was teaching children on-camera acting classes. And a script that I needed for that class hadn't arrived from New York or from Hollywood at that time. And so I wrote my own. Out of writing that script, a friend of mine showed it to a publisher who was starting up a children's division. And so I was asked to write for them. And so 24 books later and 300,000 copies sold, you know, I became an author. But it helped me to work with children to a point to where I created the Little Kids Adventure Bible. I produced that for Zondervan. I worked with Dave Ramsey and PBS Kids and Disney, and one thing led to the other. And I was starting to get to a point to where people on the set would ask me, say, how do you do this? How do you do that? How do you find this voice or find that voice? And I found that I had a knack for showing people the best direction. And so that's what really got me into teaching. But it wasn't until several years later that I really did hang out my shingle. And that was, I started doing some serious marketing about 8 years ago.
So you kind of fell into it then. It's not as if you ever sought it out. It just kind of materialized over time.
Right. And I think some people have natural talent. It's great if you've got some natural talent that you can utilize within this industry, because it really does launch you on a path much quicker than those that have to just work day in and day out at honing their skills.
I think that there's something to be said about just because you are a great voice actor doesn't necessarily make you a good coach, because, you know, many people intuitively can be a great actor, but have very limited ability to actually impart that information to another individual in a way in which they're going to be able to actually learn it. Teaching is a different set of schools than voiceover performing, a different set of skills, I should say, than voiceover performing. Steve says, and this is interesting. He's quoting a famous voice actor and coach who says, ask the coach you're thinking about working with what he or she made last year in voiceover. This person that Steve is quoting says, if you're a good and a genuine coach, you shouldn't be insulted or afraid to, prove that you made a good living the previous year in voiceover. I would make the comment, Steve, that I think that there's some great coaches out there who aren't voice actors and have never been voice actors. They have been perhaps agents in the past, or they have been producers in the past. They've never been a voice actor. In fact, when I think to my ex-boss, David Goldberg at Edge Studio, David is a very effective coach. He does a great job with people. He's certainly a sought-after coach, and he's never been behind the mic and recorded his voice in his life that I'm aware of. He was a recording engineer that developed he's got a great set of ears and developed into a coach from there. Anyone else have any thoughts on, do you think that a coach needs to have been behind the mic in order to be a good coach, or are there other avenues to get to coaching?
Hi, this is Anthea from Illinois.
Hi, Anthea.
Hi there. This is not necessarily, I don't know much in this field. I'm a musician, and I know that there are some people, the kids that I have taught have gone on to reach heights because I taught them in the beginning, but I haven't reached the same height in my career that they have. But a lot of the basics and a lot of the things that I was able to impart to them, they were able to take, and they just, they took off. So I don't think you necessarily have to be the highest level. I think you just need to be able to teach and hear. And, you have to, if you can hear what they need and you can impart that knowledge and in a way that they can individually understand. And I think every student's different. And if you can reach those students at their place that they are at, and you can do it, I think you can coach.
Well, yeah, I agree that every student's different and that every student requires a different approach from a teaching standpoint in order to learn the same lessons. Steve, who's the guy that started this whole chain of conversation, followed up and said that Nancy Wolfson's a very well-known and well-regarded coach on the West Coast. She's never been a voice actor. I know Nancy because I coached with Nancy, several years ago. She was one of my very first coaches, and I know that she is a former agent. She has never been behind the mic, but she's very good at what she does. Jim Bielikoff mentions Mary Lynn Wisner again. Another Mary Lynn, if I remember correctly, has been primarily a casting director, also based on the West Coast, and she's now become a very successful coach without having been an actual actor behind the mic.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, Graham. It's Craig here.
Hi, Craig.
Yeah, I was just going to say I've had 4 coaches, and as you know, I'm currently with Nancy just now, and I truly believe that in my experience, and obviously this doesn't cover everybody, but somebody who hasn't been behind the mic, I think has, if they've been a casting director or an agent or something like that, they seem to have a better ear. Somebody who is behind the mic and doing voiceover for a living has their own way of doing their own things. And sometimes they pass that on to the student, and that's not exactly what that student needs, in my opinion.
I agree. Totally agree.
And that's why students should always consider working with more than one coach.
Now that's interesting, Joe, because there's really two schools of thought on that. There's those who say that you really should work with more than one coach, as you just described. And then there are those who think that if you work with more than one coach, you end up being told contradictory things to do, and you end up kind of muddled and not sure how to approach things. You just suggested that working with more than one coach is advantageous. Why? Why do you think that?
I think everyone brings something different to the table. I'll work with a student. I've worked with several students. When you and I were with Edge, we had the same boss. Gosh, I think I directed probably 70 demos in that short period of time that I was there. But once I would finish coaching with one student for a commercial demo or a narration demo or a medical demo, then they would be off with another coach working on an audiobook demo. Because I think some coaches in particular have a particular area that they're strongest in. And so it depends on what your niche is, what you're going for. So you may find a coach that could direct you better in audiobooks than in commercials.
Fair enough. And do you think, though, Joe, that there is, let's say you're working specifically on commercial work. Is it advantageous to be coaching with more than one coach just to get different perspectives? Is that what you're saying?
I wouldn't do that if you're going for a particular niche and it's in commercials, then I think you're better off sticking with one coach.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to branch out after that, you might look at different areas and different coaches.
Stephen adds some really great advice here. He says, one coach gives you perhaps one way of thinking, but multiple coaches, you have to be able to interpret conflicting input.
That's true.
Yeah, which is it's what I said earlier, just Stephen said it much more eloquently and simply than I did. But Bev Standing adds, on the other hand, having more than one coach can make you more directable because you need to be able to work with different styles of direction, and being able to work with more than one coach does that. So there really is two very
brilliant.
Yeah, there really is two very different points of view, and both of them are valid.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, someone was popping in there.
That was me laughing at Joe. Thank you, Joe.
Welcome, Bev.
But it's true, because I went to Joe's house in an emergency when I was in Nashville, and I had to do a job, and he said, "Can I add some input?" And it's absolutely, and you go through your training, whether it be somebody who's a voice actor who's teaching you, or a casting director, or somebody who was an agent. Everybody has a different tone on it, and it's like any coaching and any information you get in any industry. Learn as much as you can and then take what works for you. So you have to, when you're in a session and somebody's trying to direct you to get you somewhere, you have to get there. And if you've been taught a number of different ways and this person happens to say something that triggers a memory from a training session, then you'll get there faster and makes you more directable. That's
very good.
Joe, here's a question for you. What do coaches look for when they're choosing a student in that first session? Everybody always thinks that the student gets to pick the coach, but really it's a two-way street. And there are some times when coaches, opt not to take on a particular student. When you are assessing a student, when you first speak with them, how do you go about doing that?
You have to find ways to be, for example, I had a student recently who was had a very urban sound to his voice. And I worked with him for a couple of weeks, a couple of sessions, and tried to point out to him what he was saying. He was saying dat instead of that and a few other things like that. But he just couldn't hear it. And it got to a point where I said, I don't think I'm going to be able to help you. But I referred him to another coach.
Mm-hmm.
So if I don't think I'm going to be able to help somebody, I'd just rather tell them than to just lead them on.
Have there been circumstances where just in a first meeting, you have come to the determination that I don't think I can help this person?
Yes. I do a lot of coaches, a lot of classes here in town, whether it's introduction to voiceover or commercial narration, character development for audiobooks and animation. And when I get people into those basic classes, I can pretty well tell who's going to follow through and who's not going to follow through, and who shouldn't even be in the class. And so I gently lead them through the class and give them a sense that, they've gone about as far as they can go with that first class. They wanted to come in and see what it was like. They wanted to know if they were going to have a future in the industry. And I just have to look for gentle ways to let people down, because I'm not here to crush anybody's dreams, but I am here to let them know what I think, if they're going to succeed or not. And it's just difficult to do that, to have that. What do you call that, Graham? I can't think of the word. That spark where you can actually talk with people and let them down in a gentle way rather than lead them on. But yeah, it happens quite often.
Craig made a very good point. Craig, why don't you pop on and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about this idea of dropping your coach if necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. I started off with a local coach in Houston, and he was very, very good at the basics. But I knew he wasn't going to take me where I needed to go. It was just an introductory to voiceover class that I went to. So I just started doing research, and I think I found David Goldberg after that.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked with David for a few months. And once again, I thought he was good, but he wasn't what I needed. And so after that, I think I went to Mark Cashman. And I love Mark. Mark's a really good guy. I went over to LA to speak to him. Mm-hmm. But there was something inside of me that said, I needed a little bit of a stricter person, somebody to really push me, really take me to where I need to go.
Well, you certainly found that. You found that person in Nancy Wolfson.
Yes, I did. So I am with Nancy just now, and I'm really enjoying it.
If you can get her to put the whip down.
And in truth, I've been with Nancy for nearly, I think it's 8 months now. And once you get past her abrupt ways that a lot of people seem to have, she's actually a really good down-to-earth person.
I agree, but she's an acquired taste for certain. She's not for everybody.
Yeah, and all those points throughout, as I said in my comment, it's your career that's at stake. You don't ever stay with somebody if you don't think they're getting you to where you need to be. You can't feel bad about dropping a coach. You've got to find out what you need. And it just happens it's life with humans. Sometimes you don't make a connection with somebody.
So you're saying this is about chemistry as much as it is about anything else?
I think it has got a lot to do with that. If you can build a relationship with somebody and they know how to pull something out of you that somebody else doesn't know how to do, then I think that makes a huge difference.
Very good.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you very much, Craig.
No problem.
When Craig's name came up, Craig Williams, I've got a student here in Nashville. His name's Craig Williams, but I can tell he's much taller than you, Craig.
I'm more handsome, though.
Who else has got a question for us tonight about coaching, training, training programs, training curriculum. Who else has got some ideas or some questions about the training process, voiceover education?
Hi, Graham.
Haley, how are you tonight?
I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
Fantastic. Glad that you're here.
Good. Always happy to be here. First, I just have a comment and then a question to throw out to everybody. My comment, Anthea mentioned that she comes from a musical background, and I would be in that category as well. I've studied singing for a very long time, and so just a comment on coaching. When I did step into the voiceover world, I was a little surprised to find that there's not a lot of emphasis put on actually training the instrument itself. At least that hasn't been my experience with coaches that I've trained with. It's, you know, much more about the performance, the acting side of things. And there's crossover into music for that for sure. But I was just a little surprised by that. I guess as a singer, you train your instrument so much, very similar to the way an athlete would, you know, do something repetitious like whatever their event might be over and over again. Singers do the same thing. You do scales endlessly. You learn breathing. You learn, you know, diction, all these things that are the mechanics of using your voice. And I was a little surprised to find that somewhat absent, at least in the training that I've done. So just as a general comment, I would say if anybody has, you know, wants to try something a little bit different, to maybe reach out to a singing teacher and just maybe, you know, take their voice to a different level. And that might be like tonal qualities, things like that. It can really help with your endurance if you're doing a very long project, those kinds of things. So that's just a general comment. And then my question is, because we all have done a lot of training, I would think that we all have had light bulb moments in some of our training. And I'm just wondering if others would like to share what their light bulb moments may have been. And just very quickly, mine, I did a wonderful course at the Banff Center for Fine Arts. So there's really neat resources out there that might be just a little bit outside of the voiceover world. And it was an international voice workshop. It was not for singers specifically. There were filmmakers in the workshop. There were journalists. But it had to do with really finding your voice and the deep connection between how you feel emotionally and how your voice is a reflection of how you feel emotionally, and the ability to sort of conjure, if you will, your emotional side first and just sort of allowing it to come out of your voice. So that was a real light bulb moment for me, and it has worked crossover very well into voiceover as well as singing. So I just wondered if anybody wanted to maybe share a light bulb moment.
Fantastic. Well, first of all, a great story. And I totally agree with you that the actual mechanics of using our voice is something that is rarely spoken about in voiceover training. There are some voice coaches out there who also might be speech pathologists and definitely work some of that into their training. But those coaches are few and far between. Most of them have become coaches after having been successful actors or casting directors or producers. So I think that is an interesting and very valid point. And I think that your advice for people to go out and to maybe think outside the box a little bit by getting some training, not just from voiceover coaches, but from a singing coach, makes a ton of sense to me. I think that is very, very good advice.
Yeah, there's a huge amount of value in it for sure.
Sorry about that. I didn't mean to talk over you.
I was just going to say there is a significant amount of value in studying with a a singing teacher. And what kind of sparked me to that, one of the first voiceover coaching classes that I took, there was a section of the day-long course or weekend-long course that was dedicated to vocal care. And I was quite excited because I thought, oh, you know, it'll be fun to hear the acting side of taking care of your voice. And the advice given was to have a bottle of Buckley's on hand during the session, and that you might go through the entire bottle. And I sort of was stunned by that, actually, to be honest. I mean, you know, Buckley's has its place, I guess, but it's maybe not the best approach to taking care of your actual vocal tissue on your cords. And you know, learning how to use the musculature and the breathing apparatus is maybe a little better approach.
Who has a light bulb moment that they might want to be able to share?
Well, I'd like to tell a story that is similar to Haley's story. Is that I took my first singing lesson when I was 12 years old, and I'm 62 now. So I learned how to breathe properly, like a singer, that a lot of voice talent don't know how to do. And when you're reading a piece of copy, especially for commercial copy, where they're going to cut the breaths out and all that kind of stuff, you're doing the editor a great favor by being able to string along a sentence and making sense out of something like I'm doing right now without taking a breath for a long time. And that comes through my singing studies. I went to college. I was a voice major in college. I studied classical opera in college, and that kind of breathing is second nature to me. I don't know what it's like not to breathe like a singer, but I think that is terribly important for a voice artist. My aha moment was about 5 years ago when I decided to go into the field, and I read a piece of copy on a microphone in front of a bunch of people, and everybody was dead silent after it was done. And the instructor of the class said, "That was really good. Have you ever thought about, you know, doing this?" And I went, "Not really, but I guess I should."
I can tell you my aha moment, and actually there's a connection to something that Iris mentioned in the chat box. Iris said that taking classes other than voiceover is of great help, like acting classes or improv. I went and took a couple of levels in the Second City improv program here in Toronto, and it was an amazing aha moment when I realized just how valuable improv training could be in helping inform your reads. It was a real eye-opening moment. So I, as well as Iris, highly recommend improv as a form of training other than the kind of standard voiceover training to consider. And if you live in Chicago, Los Angeles, New York, Toronto, there's some great improv schools that you can sign up with.
And that's not to say that improv is always just comedy. Improv is unscripted dialogue, basically. And you're creating a story with unscripted dialogue. It's not just necessarily telling jokes and making the audience laugh.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, frequently improv is not about going for the laugh. It's about continuing the story. Steven says, improv really helps in cases where the client or director wants you to give it another take, but to provide a take that's in a completely different vein, in a completely different approach. And thanks to improv, you can probably do 3 or 4 very different takes, and give the producer or the director what it is they're looking for.
Graham, based on what a couple of the people had to say tonight about music, their musical backgrounds, and I do love to work with singer-songwriters because I can say to a singer, you went a little flat on the end of that phrase, and you know exactly what I mean, and they can fix it right away. My aha moment, I was on the road with a band called Solid Gold during the 70s, and we recorded for K-Tel Records. We did sound-alike 50s, sound-alike 60s. And then I had a studio in Denver after that, where I was audio engineer for Air Supply, Firefall, and the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. I was working on a soundtrack for a mountain climbing film, and we were doing the music for it. And this guy said, or the producer said, my buddy's going to come in next Thursday and narrate this. And on that Thursday, this black Porsche pulls up to the front of the building, and Robert Redford gets out. And for 2 days, I got to work with Robert Redford, and he did the narration for the mountain climbing film. And that was my aha moment, because I said, I want to do what that guy does. Because we all know what a great actor he is, but for 2 days, he was a voice talent.
How did he take direction, Joe?
He didn't need any, but there was a couple of times, a couple of mispronunciations, and he appreciated knowing that he'd said something wrong. And the greatest thrill of that was, Graham, that he said, just call me Bob.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah. Nice guy. Really
now
nice
I'm
guy.
only 2 degrees of separation from Robert Redford. That's awesome. A question from Anthea. What's the going rate for training out there right now? What's the typical hourly rate? I can tell you that I'm quite certain at Edge Studio now it's $155 an hour to train via Skype or via telephone, and it's $175 an hour, I think, if you train in studio with them in New York or Los Angeles. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong there. But I also know very, very talented coaches who are coaching for $110 or $120 an hour. So what's your experience in the most recent training you've taken? What's been the per hour rate that you have been paying? You don't have to tell us the name of the coach necessarily, but I'd be interested in knowing how much you paid for your most recent training.
Hi, this is Anthea again. Hi there. There are 2 coaches that I've been checking into, and one of the reasons I've asked is one of them I believe is $210 an hour, and the other one is $250. And I didn't want to be unfair, so that's why I wanted to ask that rate. Thank you.
Yeah, those are pretty steep. For $210 or $250 an hour, I hope that they are, big name coaches that are highly in demand, because it's hard to rationalize that kind of rate for most coaching. At least in my point of view. Stephen adds, I've been paying as low as $100 at the low end and as much as $250 on the high end. And I know there's coaches out there that charge upwards of $400 an hour, but I think often in that case, you're paying as much for the brand name of the coach as you are for the actual content of the coaching.
I think too, it's Linda, that it would depend on where I am in my career, I think too. But I've coached with a few different people just to kind of get a feel for what I like in a coach. And the lowest I've paid is $100. The most I've paid is $175. And that was with a very well-known, reputable coach. So to me, I feel like, gosh, if I had to pay anything, $200 or higher, it feels like you could still get a very top-notch coach for that 175-ish mark.
Yeah, so there's a website out there that's run by Chuck Duran and Stacy J. Aswad, who are the hosts behind VO Buzz Weekly, and they're tremendous people. but they've put together this website called Open Coaches, and they've got some very, very well-known coaches on that website, and they all seem to be between $175 and $250 an hour. But remember that Chuck and Stacy have a cut in there as well for, the website maintenance and the referral of you as the client to the coach. And I think that often if you were to approach the same coach directly, and they almost all have their own websites, that you could probably get a better deal than going through the Open Coaches platform. And I think that that's the way in several situations, like thinking back to my time at Edge Studio. Edge Studio's rate now is $175 an hour for in-studio coaching. But there are a couple of Edge Studio coaches who you can work with directly and pay somewhat less. So, there's a certain amount of convenience when you're working with one of these larger coaching organizations that kind of organizes everything and sets it all up for you versus you approaching the coaches directly.
And Graham, this is Nelson in Tampa.
Hey, Nelson.
You're right about the names. I start with J. Michael this week, and he's a little bit higher than what you had mentioned.
Yes, because no one thinks as highly of J. Michael's value as J. Michael does.
That's true.
And I say that with much love, and I would say that to J. Michael to his face, so I don't feel as if I'm picking on him too much. J. Michael has the advantage of he's very busy, and he can afford to be picky about who he wants to coach and how much he wants to charge, because he doesn't have to worry about filling up coaching slots, because he actually probably, every time he spends an hour coaching, he probably loses money versus how much he could have made in the same hour doing voiceover. So
that's probably true. Yes.
Yeah,
I know I did have to audition.
I'm sorry, Nelson, I was speaking over you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did have to audition to become a student of his. So
yeah,
I've had several coaches over the years. I've had several coaches over the years, and I've spoken to you in this regard in the past. And with different circumstances, I was having to change coaches quite a bit. And with J-Mo, I'm hoping stability, because this will be my first demo.
Well, J. Michael is an excellent demo producer. He's a very good director, and then he has a very good team of people that actually do the production. And I've heard his demos, and they sound good. So I wish you the best, and I'm sure that you're going to end up with something you're happy with. Steve adds that, hey, I'll coach for $5 an hour. You can catch him on Fiverr. And then he goes, just kidding. Joe,
Graham, this is
story, Steve. I'm going to come right back to you. Joe says he charges $125 an hour, or a package price of $199 if you buy 2 sessions at the same time. So, Joe, thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. Sorry, Steve, please go ahead.
no problem. This is Steve G, since there's about 50 of us on apparently named Steve. So I wanted to give you an aha moment. Some of you may have heard this before, but I come from the East Coast, where we tend to speak quickly. I took that to the next level of speaking quickly, and working with Uncle Roy, he kept telling me to slow down, and you're hearing yourself, and you're really much faster than you think you are, and we're going through it. And this is a family podcast, so I'll be easy on it. He said, look, STFD. And I said, what? And he said, slow the blank down. And he said, now I want you to put that sign in your booth. And I stare at it every time I'm recording, and it's definitely an aha moment.
Well, it certainly sounds like something that Roy would say. For those of you who aren't familiar with Uncle Roy, Steve is referring to Roy Yokelson, and Roy works out of New Jersey, I think, isn't it, Steve?
Yes.
Yeah, he works out of New Jersey, and he's a very well-known, character within the voiceover community. He's a coach, he's a demo producer, and an all-around good guy. So Roy Yokelson, Yokelson, if you're looking to try and find him. And slow the blank down. That definitely sounds like something Roy would say. Who else has got a question for us or a comment with regards to coaching, training, webinars, anything to do with voiceover education?
Hi, Graham. It's Trey here.
Hey, Trey.
I am so glad to hear all of my mastermind friends online here, Joe and everybody else, saying the same things that I've been self-discovering. I'm going at this business of getting into the industry totally on my own path. In that, as a contractor, I know how I operate and in the past, and so I've purchased a boatload of equipment. I'm going to build my studio. I'm getting training currently, and when I'm all ready to go, it's as if the confluence of the stars happens. Things will take right off. Well, along the way in the training, this is where the aha moment hit me. I've been doing almost just by what shall I say, accidental meetings with people. I've been doing training with Roger Love in Hollywood in terms of voice mechanics and on stage work. And I'm going down to work with Bo Eason here in a few weeks in Santa Clara. And I've had voiceover training and been in sessions with, 8 to 10 other people and so on and so forth. And what I've noticed is that, by George, I've got a music background. I was a musician for 17 years and a singer and drummer and stuff. And, I know how to move and I know how to be physical with the delivery and everything. And that's just part of the whole picture of being a complete communicator. That's what I think the coaches I've been blessed to be in front of speak very in a very focused manner about their trade. And yet I'm seeing, as I go from coach to coach in some different disciplines, by George, these guys are all interrelated and they don't even know it. So I'm going to keep on following your advice, everybody online, because I think you're right on the money. If you can be good at all these communication skills, can't do anything but enhance how you are in voiceover.
I think that you make a very good point when you say that voiceover is really just a very narrow part of being a total communicator. And when we're being hired by a producer, we're being hired by a client, they're looking for us to deliver their message in a compelling way. And the only way that we can deliver that message in a compelling way is if we are that total package of communicator, not just someone who can sit in front of a microphone and speak the lines. So I think that your aha moment, the learning that you've been able to gain as a result of your path is an incredibly valid one.
When it comes to coaches also, if I might add, thank you. I think if you start with someone you can afford and become basically a professional student of coaches, okay, if you see my perspective, you soon become smart enough to know, hey, when you're in front of another coach who's really 10 miles ahead of where you were before, you say, okay, now I can see this too, rather than being overwhelmed starting in over your head. it's just like playing t-ball. You put the kids up there to swing the bat, and you don't care what the heck they do. You know, just walk out to the plate and make an appearance. And you don't want to pay $100 an hour for that. You want to get some confidence and you know, learn that the microphone won't bite you with static electricity and the whole nine. You really got to, you know, you start with the super basics and work your way up. And someday, Joe, Lesh, I hope to be in touch with you too.
Hey, Trey, what do you say?
I'm glad you're on there. I'll say that.
Yeah,
I'm really glad. It's always
good to see you here tonight.
You too. VO Atlanta was a good experience for all of us.
Yes, sir, it was.
Yeah. And Trey, I do want to mention, I know I owe you an email, and I promise I'll get that back to you tomorrow or Tuesday. So.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
No problem. Folks, I apologize. I have to scoot a little early tonight. So we're going to cut it short now, just 3 or 4 minutes early. I want to thank you all so much for your participation tonight. There were some great conversations here with regards to coaching and voiceover training. I appreciate the input that all of you who opened up your mics and gave us advice, gave us stories, were able to provide. Thank you so much for that. So until next week, have a great week, work hard, audition lots, make lots of bookings, make lots of money. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, Graham.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Good night, all.